Hi class. Now let's take a look at warm fronts. Okay? So warm front, again, we've talked about warm fronts in class before. And if we draw it, it's a warm front is a red line with red semicircles. And the red semicircles point into the direction that the warm moist air is moving. Okay, and so by definition, a warm front is going to be an advancing warm air mass, most likely maritime tropical air. And so this is going to be warmer and moister, and therefore less dense air. All right, if we draw this in 3 dimensions, it'll look something like this. All right, so it's the edge. Now remember, we talked about before, this is the tail edge of a continental polar air mass that is retreating out into the Atlantic Ocean. So typically this is in the eastern one half of the United States. You got warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico doing the advancing, and it's advancing on the tail end or tail edge of a retreating continental polar air mass that's heading out towards the east or northeast over the Atlantic Ocean. Being continental polar air, this is going to be cooler, if not cold, drier air, and therefore it's going to be more dense. All right, and so now we've got our maritime tropical air doing the advancing. So here we go. It is advancing, and it comes across this wedge of continental polar air, which is more dense. And being more dense, it's going to rise. So it's going to kind of piggyback style up over the back of this wedge of cooler, drier, denser air. And as it does, there's going to be a typical cloud sequence involved with warm fronts. So way out in front, we're going to have cirrus clouds, typically. So cirrus clouds way out there. Those cirrus clouds often are going to thicken into cirrostratus. And so sometimes you'll see rings around the sun or rings around the moon as visible radiation gets refracted by the ice crystals of the cirrostratus clouds, creating that ring around the sun or the moon. And so there's an old folklore that says, ring around the moon, rain within 24 hours. And there's good reason for that. If there's a ring around the moon, that means there's cirrostratus clouds. Cirrostratus often, but not always, indicate the passage or the coming of a warm front in your area. Those cirrostratus clouds will thicken up into altostratus clouds. And those altostratus clouds then will thicken eventually. They'll get lower in the sky, and they will thicken into either stratus or nimbostratus clouds. Now remember from our discussion on clouds that stratus is a thinner cloud. If you get precipitation out of that, it's likely going to be kind of drizzly, light precipitation. But if it's nimbostratus, and again with these, with the maritime tropical area, you probably have more moisture to work with. Nimbostratus clouds, being thicker, are going to create rain, first of all, and it'll be light to moderate rain typically associated with the warm front. So now let's take a look at the front itself. So this is a pretty gently sloped leading edge of the warm front. And so being a fairly gently sloped leading edge, we're talking about a slope aspect here, 1 mile high for every 200 miles across. So this is much more gently sloped compared to a cold front, again, typically. And the movement of a warm front is slower. So this is going to move at an average of about 15 miles per hour, where we had said that a cold front is going to move 20 to 25 miles per hour. So as a result, if you have precipitation associated with a warm front, it's typically going to be light to moderate. Okay, so light to moderate, because you're looking at either stratus or nimbostratus clouds. Okay, and because it's moving at a slower rate, this will probably be precipitation of longer duration because of that slower movement. Okay, now I don't want to kid you or lie to you. You can get severe weather out of warm fronts. It does happen all the time, but if you compare it to a cold front, it's just not as likely to have severe weather associated with a warm front, but it does happen. These nimbostratus clouds can develop perhaps into cumulonimbus, maybe 35, 45,000 feet thick, and you can get some good thunderstorms out of that. Heavy rain, you can get some downpours and some downdrafts that are pretty strong, get some lightning out of that. And so again, I don't want to kid you that even though we say warm fronts have gently sloped leading edges, you can get some thunderstorms out of this. So, but typically it's light to moderate precipitation for longer duration. All right.